Appreciate it. Well, hope everyone's having a great conference so far. All right, getting some great value. Awesome, I love it. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. So my name is Chris Salem, and I just want you to imagine this. You're in a meeting, and in that meeting, you could feel the tension in the air. And voices begin to rise, and you can feel the conflict crackling in the room. And then suddenly, somebody comes in, calm, composed, and collected, has a few choice words, and then neutralizes that conflict to now turn that conflict from discord into breakthrough ideas. How many of you here would like to be that person that would be the example and be a resource that would help your people that you work with directly and indirectly to help them to do that? All right, great. So we're going to be talking about conflict resolution and the art of the workplace mediation. And one of the things as a speaker, I like to make this engaging. This is about you. We want to create an experience. It's not about just hearing, things off of a slide, but what you can actually do and take some of the things that are going to be shared to be part of that experience and how you can do something differently that can help to now take conflict, not to run away from it, not to eliminate it, because you're never going to eliminate it, but to use it to your advantage, that you can turn challenges now into opportunities. When you can turn a challenge into an opportunity, now you can take an opportunity and turn it into a result. Would it be safe to say that any result that you've ever had that you could put your name next to and be proud of, was it because everything went right? Right? You had some challenges along the way, right? Yeah, definitely. But a lot of times, there are many times you wanted to run away from those challenges. You wanted to avoid it. You wanted to deflect it onto somebody else or a group of people, but you took ownership of it. But it's those challenges that turn into opportunities, and then opportunities that turn in results. So little information about where this comes from. I've been, as James mentioned, I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, 34 years in my total, and working since 1990. But 26 plus years, I've immersed myself in the area of applying emotional intelligence before it even became a buzzword in the workplace, and how you can develop people and help to generate better results when we can truly understand emotional intelligence. So I'm going to be specifically sharing a lot of information from a place of conflict resolution, because that's the subject of what I'm sharing today. But I'll be touching on a lot of EQ principles and how we can now use conflict to our advantage. Now, you can't see my wife. She's blocked behind me. Somehow when I did the picture and the three, it blocked her, but that's my son there on the right. And then again, a current headshot of mine, and as a professional speaker. So I'm going to be drawing upon a lot of real life experience, not just things that I've learned along the way, but things that are actually been done working with organizations like yourself and what you can do to do better. So let's take a look at why conflict happens in the workplace. So why do you think conflict happens in the workplace? It's a what? It's agreements, right? Disagreements in this case. You kind of see it from different perspectives. How about somebody else? Different experiences, different, like you said, you might have different experience, maybe a different look on things, that type of thing. Would it be safe to say that a lot of times like you said, we come in and we look at situations from only our lens, not somebody else's? Would it be safe to say? How about anybody else? What would be something else? Not get in your way. So a lot of times our egos could get involved in that. And we know, and we're humans, we all have egos on some level, but is those egos now getting in the way? Because, hey, if it's not my idea, then it's going to be nobody's idea. So we want to make sure that, again, there's more than one person in any given situation, especially when you have an organization. Everything is just not going to revolve around how you look at things. So we have to be open to that, especially if we're leaders. And this is where conflict, understanding conflict resolution and how the art of the mediator can do it. So let's take a look at some of the things here. So these are just some common things. I'm going to get into some more here. But somebody said ego, right? We had egos, warring egos, workplace stress. Now, what about stress? Does stress just come from the workplace? Where else does it come from? Home, right? A lot of times, a lot of it, well, I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the workplace, because a lot of times you bring what goes on in the workplace into your everyday lives. But it's those things also happen in your lives that people bring into the workplace, not even knowing they're doing it. Would it be safe to say that that happens? Because a lot of times, if somebody is out of sorts, maybe somebody is not, normally they would agree to certain things. Now they've kind of had a certain change in attitude and how they approach things. A lot of times that can mean that there could be something going on in their life. It could be something, whether they're going through a divorce, maybe they lost a loved one, maybe there's a financial situation they're going through. There could be a multitude of different things that are happening. But see, it's not our job to fix that for them. It's our job to just understand. And we don't have to know exactly what's going on, but we have to be understanding to know that a lot of times when people are doing that, it's not personal, but we have to know where to establish boundaries and know how to do certain things in a different way if we're going to get people back on a better page to now work with towards turning a challenge into an opportunity. So let's take a look at, we have heavy workloads as well. Would it be safe to say that more than ever now in your role and duties, you probably have more than you can chew? It's a lot of that right now. A lot of people are now downsized and now are working, have multiple duties more than when they got hired. So a lot of times that can put a lot of undue stress and cause tension amongst other people. So I'm going to talk about the concepts of why expectations fall through the cracks, why that happens, and what can lead to these conflicts that we experience. So let's take a look at some of the 7 causes. Now, there's more than 7, of course, but these are some of the main ones. When you look at this list, what do you think would be the biggest catalyst when it comes to causing conflict? Oh, I love it. You guys are great, making my job a lot easier. So why communication? Why would communication be the biggest hurdle? Yeah, everything else kind of can fall right under it. You can't have morale without effective communication, right? If we don't have effective communication, morale is just not going to come out of nowhere and people are going to come together. You got to have effective communication. How about unclear job responsibilities? Would it be safe to say that we just assume and speculate what each other's role and duties are? Sometimes we don't even know exactly what our role and duties are. You might have gotten hired and you knew at the time, but now that you've gotten into your job and you've been doing it for maybe a year or two, even longer, you just assume what that is what you do. And sometimes some other people are looking at it going, well, why is he or she not doing this? So you can see where the lack of communication can cause this friction to build up. And it's like with anything. If you had a hill and you had like a snowball and it's going to roll down the hill, right? What's going to happen by the time it gets down to the bottom? It's going to get bigger because it's going to pick up more snow and get bigger. It's the same thing with conflict. Conflict continues to grow when it's unchecked. And when we don't have the awareness to a lot of things that we're talking about here. So we're going to get into a lot of that, but lack of communication is one of the biggest areas. And we're going to talk about, when we get into the solutions, where that comes in. What about personalities? Now think about personalities, right? A lot of people, how many of you are familiar with the DISC profile? Got one person? Now, again, there's many different personality assessments out there. And I'm not here to talk about any particular one, but I'll use DISC as an example because DISC has been around for, almost 75 years now. There are different personality types. There are people that are either task-oriented or they're people-oriented, meaning that when they make decisions and how they look at things is based upon the task or the people involved. Now, there's different variations of that, of course. You have a D, which is for dominant. They typically are in a leadership position, but they are motivated internally by results. They don't want the details, just show me the results. Share with me how I can get the results. Now, their counterparts, right below them, are the C's. These are people that are usually project managers, engineers, mathematicians, statisticians. These are people that when they look at things, they see things based upon facts, figures, trends, data. They want to make sure that things can be substantiated before they make a decision or agree to something. You have to be able to convince them with information that's going to get their buy-in. That's usually a C. Now, on the other side, you got your people. You got I's that are also leaders. They are called influencers. And they typically might see them more like in a marketing position, a PR position, sales maybe, that type of thing. And with them, they're basing things based upon people. It's the people involved before the task itself. That's very important. And then finally, you have your S's. S's are going to be steadiness. And what they are with steadiness, these are people that are your team players. These are the people that are going to go to bat for you, customer service. They're going to support you in all the different projects that you're working with. Very similar to a C, except in this case, they don't have to have facts, figures, trends, or stats, but they also don't want to be in the limelight. They also don't want to be put into a position where they have to make the decision. They just want to support whatever you're working on. So they also are very people-centric. Now, with that being said, how you communicate to one person, would it be the same to the other? Sometimes they'll be looking at you like you're talking in Russian or some other language. They don't have no idea what you're saying, even though they might be doing this. And then all of a sudden, everything else they're doing is not supporting what they're nodding to. And now you get frustrated. These are the things that can then lead to again, conflict. But if we are now aware that there are different personality types. Now, there's other things that are factors in this case that could be causes. Just in this room, you feel like there's different multi-generational types in this room? How many of you are baby boomers? I don't see a lot of baby boomers in here. Nobody's how about a Gen X? I'm a Gen X. Got a Gen X? We got our Gen X. All right. Yeah, we could. How about millennials? Like, I got to be a lot of millennials in here, right? How about Gen Z? I got some Gen Z. All right, awesome. Now, the next generational type coming up is the Alpha. So the Alpha is going to be the new one coming into the workforce now here in a couple of years. Now, with that being said, with different generations, you think that if how a baby boomer talks to a baby boomer, or let's say a Gen X, because there's no baby boomers in, you think like me, if I'm talking to another Gen X, is it going to be the same thing if I'm talking to a Gen Z? No. When I talk to my son and I talk to my wife, completely different ways I communicate. But if I just assumed and speculated and said, this is the way I communicate, and you better, son, better be able to understand that, then all it's going to do is lead to more frustration, aggravation, and dividing the relationship that we have to work together versus bring us together. I got to find ways that I can communicate that he can understand. And I'm going to be sharing with you some things here, a concept with you. I don't want to let it out of the bag yet, because it's going to be something maybe you've never heard before. But I can almost guarantee that when you do hear it and it resonates with you, it's going to make sense and how you can start making changes within you to start making communication work in your favor with the people that you're working with. And this is not only here in the organization, but also in your personal lives, as a spouse, as a parent, as a member of your community, whatever that may be. So we're going to talk about that. But in this case, the biggest part is communication that drives a lot of these different areas. We'll talk about all of these particular areas and how we can make improvements there. So when we have unresolved conflict, what's going to be the byproduct? We're going to have a lack of morale. Now, what happens when we have a lack of morale? We have some people that will come into work because it's a means to an end, right? They have to have a job. They have to pay bills. They have a mortgage. They got to put food on the table. They got to put kids through school. But does that mean they're full-heartedly involved with what they're doing? Or are they doing the bare minimum? There's a lot of that going on, right? And especially sometimes with the younger generation, and not because that they don't want to work. It's just, it is what it is. There's again, how they look at things. And maybe that we don't have the environment set up to be conducive to all these generational types. I'll get into that a little later. But that can cause, again, a divide. So we don't have morale. And if we don't have morale, what's going to happen? Are we going to be able to now be more effective as a group to turn challenges into opportunities and opportunities into results? No. Now you got productivity. Productivity is just a byproduct of how disciplined and how consistent you are in your role and duties. Now, would it be safe to say that you think people overall, be honest, do you feel that they're disciplined and consistent every day in their role and duties? Or does it fluctuate? Fluctuates, right? Some days it's just like some people check out sometimes, maybe more often than they should. With that being said, do you think that's going to impact productivity? Or they might still get things done, but they're not efficient. Why did it take them 12 hours to finish something when maybe they could have done it in 4 hours? Maybe their time management is off because they don't value their time. Maybe they're making themselves too available to others and not establishing healthy boundaries. And oftentimes they might be distracted by things that are not even important or relevant to what they're working on, thus taking them away from the things that are. And then when they're in the final hour to finish something, they get frustrated, they get aggravated, they get anxious. And these are the very things that could be impacting the people they're working with, causing potential or more conflict. So all of these have a byproduct. Now, this is a big issue in a lot of organizations, retention. What do we mean by retention? Yes. Now, we live in an environment, would it be safe to say in the last probably, it's got to be now 20, yeah, probably well over almost 25 years now, that it's not like back when I started back in 1990, when I had my first job at an aerospace company. When I got there, there had been people that had been there for their entire careers. They had been there from the time they either got out of high school or they were maybe graduated college, they were there. Nowadays, most people are lucky if they last somewhere, a couple years, and they move somewhere else. So the retention, so there's this constant onboarding that are going on. Now, is that a way to build a sustainable model for a successful team environment if we always got people going in and out? Now, it's going to happen, but when there's more of it than we'd like, is that going to disrupt? And now we got to onboard people, get them to see if they can now align with our values of our group, our team, our organization, getting them aligned with the vision, the value proposition of our what we're looking to do. All of those take time to develop. And these are the very things that can lead to retention. And when people feel they're not being communicated to properly, whether if they know it or not, and they're not even communicating that back to you, oftentimes, how do you find out? They leave. They leave. Because it's easier to do that than actually feel like, oh, if I raise my hand and say something, they may think I'm stupid or incompetent, so I'm going to just not say anything. Would it be safe to say that there are probably people doing that? And even if you're leaders, we might be doing that ourselves because we're afraid we don't want to expose something that we don't know. But see, that's where the importance of transparency is. That we're not here to air our dirty laundry, but by being transparent, when we could put things out on the table, not here to judge or condemn anybody, but we can find ways we can improve upon things. Maybe sometimes we might be putting people into situations that play to their weaknesses, not to their strengths. Because we just assumed, we thought they could do that. But that's where, again, all these things that can lead to conflict. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we can do in making that better here shortly. But retention is a real issue. It's one of the number one issues, if you ask most organizations in the world, regardless of size, that is a big problem. And these are the very things that are leading to more conflict. And then when they leave and they have to bring a new people in because of the onboarding and then getting those people acclimated to the rest of the team, takes a lot of time. And there's a lot of things that have to go into that. And then God forbid if those people leave, and then it's just a constant turnstile of constantly putting a Band-Aid on things. You're not moving ahead. But these are the very things that can lead to conflict. Conflict is just simply a byproduct of all these things. And again, the catalyst in it all is the lack of communication. We just assume and speculate as human beings. Would it be safe to say that assumption and speculation in communication could be, again, the culprit in a breakdown in almost anything? It could be a breakdown in a team, a breakdown in a marriage, a breakdown as being a more effective parent to your kids, a member in your community runs rampant. Does that mean that you're to blame? No, it's just that you know what you know. But if we can now be aware of these things, and say to ourselves, okay, if we can get better at it, I can't control what other people are going to do, but I can control what I can do. These are the things that are going to help you to become a better example and better resource for others. So what is conflict? Let's break down what conflict is. What does conflict mean to you? Disagreements, okay? So you disagree on something and how you look at it. Now, would it be safe to say that a disagreement can also be, in a way, a good thing? Yeah. Why? Yeah, people have different ways of looking at things, but sometimes we can have a different perspective, a different look at how we can become more creative, innovative in what we're doing. Again, you probably heard this, and this is especially for the old timers like me. Well, this is the way we've always done it, and we're not going to change it now. And meanwhile, I got the Gen Z, 20-something looking at me like, this guy doesn't get it. And he's laughing at me under his breath or her breath. And it's true. It's true. Again, we have to be able to be open. Disagreement in a way is okay, as long as, again, you use it in a positive way to find collectively what can work best for the situation. Now, again, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag yet, because I'm going to talk about what that really means and what we can do there. Because sometimes that's a hard thing to do, especially for the people that have been around a while, like myself, where I didn't learn this stuff. I had to learn the hard way. That's why I'm here, why I've dedicated my life speaking at conferences and events, no matter what size they are, to share this information, because I learned it the hard way. If I had learned about this when I was younger, oh my God, I would be in so much a better place. But nonetheless, that's how it is. That's sometimes how the cookie crumbles. But I'm glad that happened, because I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing had I not gone through the difficult path. So in this way, I'm hopefully going to help all of you kind of see things maybe from a different perspective upon conclusion of today's session. So let's take a look at the definition. Take a look at the definition here. There's organizational conflict, task-based conflict, relationship-based conflict. Again, we talked about the different personality types, and then managerial or process style communication. But just as everyone said, disagreement. You can see that word is common throughout. But disagreement, and again, in itself is not a bad thing. Conflict in itself is not a bad thing. Moderate levels of conflict are actually good. Because just think about this. What if everything we did went right? Look at, well, that light looked like it was like a window, and I thought it was the sun when I was looking at it, but it's a light. God, that tricked me for a minute. But let's say everything was perfect. It was 70 degrees out every day, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. You got in your car, there was no traffic, and you got here on time. Everything went right. What would eventually happen? Bored? Somebody said bored? What was that? You wouldn't learn anything. You would become complacent. No growth, bored. And then what ends up happening when you become complacent and bored? What do you end up doing? You just, you check out, and you create a problem. You'll create a problem regardless. That's what people will do. So it's necessary that we have challenges, problems. Without them, we can't become innovative, creative, and grow. Without conflict on some level, we can't do that either. But there's a difference, though. There's conflict, and then there's conflict. We don't want this conflict. We want the conflict at a moderate level. We want to be able to have disagreement, but in a way that we understand and relate to one another and find out what's best for that situation. Doesn't mean it's your idea this time or somebody else's, but it's what is best. And it doesn't mean that it'll always work, but it's knowing that you're doing what's best overall for the people that are involved, whether if that's direct, indirect, or if that involves the people that you're serving. So it's not like the old days where the decision was made from the top and that was it, and you had to adhere to it. And oftentimes people would fight it. Now, and I know back in the day, the baby boomers and some of the older Gen X would deal with it and conform if they had to it. But meanwhile, it didn't sit well. They'd still deal with it. They didn't leave, because that's how we were conditioned back then. We could take it. But those generations, like now, later, millennials and Gen Z, they're not going to tolerate that. They're gone. They're done. So it's completely different. So we have to be able to now be look at conflict in a completely different way, that we can now see it as our friend. You use it as a way, as a tool to help us bring people together, to unite, and not allow it to get to that next level. So we're looking at conflict now from a place of being proactive, not reactive. Because most conflict, when we look at conflict, we're in a reactive state. We're not in a proactive state. And this is when we get into talk about the role of the mediator. A lot of times when you think about bringing a mediator in, what does that often mean? You bring in somebody that's a mediator. Third-party mediator come in because now the conflict has gotten so big, it's become toxic, and now it's causing some major problems. Now, would that be safe to say now bringing that mediator in is now reactive? Yeah. But what if we were to say that a mediator doesn't have to be that you're officially a mediator by title, but that you could be a mediator by example, that you could be ongoing playing a mediator role and keeping conflict in check. So it's not going up like this, it's kind of staying its course. And this way you could be one step ahead of the curve to be more proactive. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that we can do and give you some suggestions on that. And you'll notice that when I do this, I'm never going to tell you what to do. I'm only going to share. You get to decide what that means to you. And I love to have all of your input on that as well. But so we got to, again, everyone's going to have a different view on what conflict means to him or her. But when you look at the psychological aspects of conflict, how it plays out is with our emotions, our natural biases, and our perceptions. So what's oftentimes when our emotions, when we're dealing with conflict, what's often the byproduct, what those emotions will be? Frustration, anger. So anger is the lowest vibrational negative emotion there is. Now, I'm not here to say that negative emotions are also a bad thing. A lot of times negative emotions get a bad rap. Everyone says, oh, you should negate your negative emotions. Get rid of them. Don't listen to them. No, they're actually in a way a good thing. Just like conflict itself on a moderate level is good. Because without a negative emotion, what's going to happen? You're not going to know what has to be addressed or fixed or adjusted. Negative emotions, all they are messages that your mind or your subconscious are sharing with you. Oftentimes you experience it in the body. You might have a dull ache somewhere or maybe back pain or something like that. It's a message to say you have something unresolved. Now, whether that's on a personal level or you experiencing that, whatever you're dealing with on your team or community, whatever that may be. So negative emotions are actually not a bad thing. They're just messages. It's how we use them to now turn that challenge now into an opportunity. So without them, we're kind of like just kind of floating around with no compass, knowing where we're going. Now, what about biases? What do you think that comes into play? We all have natural biases, whether if we want to admit it or not. But oftentimes we don't realize how it plays a role in how we are looking at things, how we make decisions, how we're quick to judge. I know me 26 plus years ago. I grew up, now this was all in hindsight. I grew up a passive communicator and an aggressive behaviorist. So I was a passive aggressive. And the reason why I grew up that way is because when I grew up, my father was seldom around. And when he was emotionally checked out. So as a boy growing up, a boy wants to be noticed by his father, especially if he's at a ball game and he hits a home run into the left field and you look in the stands and dad's not there. So I didn't have validation growing up. So where do you think I got the validation from? Everybody, all of you. And are all of you going to be able to validate and fill that hole of validation that I'm seeking? No, it'll never be filled. But I became an enabler. I became a pleaser and an enabler. Because if I pleased and enabled you, you would validate me. Now, it was also an aggressive side of me. That was on the behavior, because I also grew up a perfectionist. I learned that from my mother. Everything had to be perfect. And if it wasn't, it was taken care of. But I wasn't accountable. It just got done. So I didn't learn. But yet when things weren't perfect, and if I couldn't control it, I would do everything I could to control it. But when it didn't go my way, guess where I would deflect that onto? All of you. The reason why we didn't meet our team goals this week is because of you. Because of what's going on in the community, what's going on with the government, what's going on with the world in general. You would find any given reason why it wasn't your fault. That was because that's what perfectionists do. Everything. So you can see how a lot of times that can play into biases when we are now working with other people. I didn't realize this at the time. I didn't know anything about this stuff. This is why I'm speaking from real life experience, not textbook, what you read in going for your MBA in some business book. This is from real life. And I'm one of those old school guys where it's all about real life experience, not about what you just read in some management book. But these are the things that are happening, and it shapes our perceptions and how we look at the world, how we look at other people, how we look at situations. And how I look at it will be different how she looks at it, how she looks at it, how he looks at it. Now we're all together as a team, and we got slightly different perceptions. Now we got to find a way, how do we come together and make it work? Factoring all these things that have been built inside of you since the time you were a little child and now became an adult. We have to be aware of that. That's what we call what emotional intelligence is all about. I know James talked about that earlier, so I'm not going to get into all those things, but I will touch on some of the things with it when we talk about solutions to how we can now use conflict to our advantage. But these are the things that are real, that are getting into our day-to-day life and work when we are handling any given situation. And would it be safe to say that most things that we're dealing with are they in our control or outside of our control? In your control? They're both, but which one more? Out of your control. Yeah. Now, again, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag again. I'm keeping you guys dangling. You're like, when's he going to share this with us? Because I'm going to share with you what are the things that are beyond our control. And when you hear this, you're going to be like, oh my God, why am I always now frustrated and I'm always anxious? Hopefully this is going to help you to kind of see that differently and start to give yourself a break in that area so you don't sweat the small stuff. And these are the things that are going to play a role. Now, you think if you lower how you look at conflict and you become now an example and a resource for that every day, you think that's going to impact other people around you? Yeah. Now imagine now they're starting to do it for themselves. It becomes contagious. Does that mean if we had 10, let's say we had 10 people overall, doesn't mean all 10 people are going to do it. Maybe, but if we had 6 out of the 10 do it, and then maybe another couple do it on some level, and then there's always going to be those 2 people that, whatever reason, they never get it. Okay, that's just inevitable. That's the law of numbers. But nonetheless, if we got 6 or 8 people now moving forward, you think that's going to now reduce conflict to a healthier level and start to generate turning more challenges into results because we see them as opportunities? Yeah. We're not going to constantly rehash the challenge or the problem and point the fingers at everybody and constantly just circulate that over and over, creating more conflict and eventually more toxicity in that environment. Thus, then when it gets to a certain point, either people leave, people get laid off, they get fired, or you got to bring a mediator in. So our goal is that we want to avoid bringing a mediator in to be reactive. We want to become the mediator ourselves so we can be proactive and be an example and be a resource of it. So let's take a look at just some things that we want to strive to do. So this is just a model of when we look at how we deal with any given situation, a project, an initiative, a movement, whatever it is. We could either be competing, avoiding, we could be collaborating or accommodating. Now, in these particular areas, a lot of these are self-explanatory. So this side here is going to be what a lot of the old school used to do things here. But when we compete, what are we actually doing? Are we helping each other? No. We're constantly trying to outdo each other in terms of like, I told you I'm right and you were wrong. Is that going to increase morale? Is that going to increase more people want to work harder and to contribute? No, it's going to push people away. If I avoid it, which a lot of people do, I don't want to deal with it right now. So they just throw it under the carpet. And each day, each week, each quarter, each year, it starts to build up, up, and up. And then what happens? It's like what happens to a volcano? Maybe it's been dormant for a while, now becomes active. It's going to erupt. It's going to happen at some point. Now, a volcano might take many, many centuries or years for it to erupt, but here in this case, that will happen a lot quicker, a lot quicker. So in this case, accommodating is better, but what typically happens when we accommodate? We enable. We enable. So if I enable, let's say for her, like there were some things that she could be better at, but I'm enabling her and I'm going to say, don't worry, I'll fix it. Am I really helping her? No, I'm enabling her to stay stagnant and stuck because now she becomes dependent on me for that thing. I'm not encouraging her to come out of her comfort zone to do something better. So accommodating is not an answer either overall. But collaborating is better. Collaborating now recognizes that we all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. And I'm very transparent with that. Whereas I used to hide it. But imagine now now I'm not saying you all come in and start airing your dirty laundry and talking about your darkest deep secrets with everybody. I'm not saying that, but if you could be more transparent, if you have a transparent environment where people now know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, you could be in a better situation knowing how to do our best, never going to be perfect, and how we can align and work and leverage our strengths better and offset our weaknesses. Because my strengths might be her weaknesses. Your strengths might be my weakness. But if we can offset that and find a way to work better, it's going to find harmony. It's never going to be perfect balance, but it's going to be harmony. It's like a seesaw, right? A seesaw is never going to be balanced on its axis point like that. It's going to teeter. That's where we want to be. If we're going to use that as an analogy. And compromising is not just giving in. It's knowing to say, okay, this is not normally, if it were up to me, this is not what I would have chosen. But I'm only saying that to myself. But the team overall, the consensus is saying, we want to do this. Well, we're going to do that. Doesn't mean I have to agree 100%, but it also knows that I also can't fight it either. So we got to know when to do what's best. And sometimes it could go against how you would have normally if it were up to you to make that decision. But just knowing there's more people involved. But this is what's going to be the difference between lack of cooperation, high cooperation, and again, assertiveness. And assertiveness means that we are being specific, clear, and concise with ourselves and other people, leaving very little to no room for assumption and speculation and communication. And when I get to the communication part, we're going to talk a little more deeper what that means. So let's get into the tools and the strategies, and let's get into the solution now. We talked about the challenges. We're all ready. Everybody ready for now what we can do different? All right, great. So let's do that. Let's talk about some of the practical strategies and tools. And again, I'm just going to share with you, and I'd like to hear from you what that might mean to you. Maybe you've already done some of these things. Maybe, hey, I've heard of this, but I've never done it. But what if I were to do it? I'd like to hear from some of you on that. Yes, go ahead. Well, let me just get back to the next thing. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Absolutely. Now, he said active listening. There's listening, and then there's active listening. We have a slide that I'm going to get to on that. So active listening is different from just listening. People listen all the time. You're hearing what I'm saying, and you might be going like this, but does that mean you really understand what I'm saying? No. But what if I'm active listening, and now I might say, well, I think I know what he's saying. What could you do now to ensure that you heard what I exactly meant? Clarify. Just like he volunteered and asked a question, you could ask a question and get clarity instead of just assuming, I think that's what he meant, but it may not. So these things, like, again, we got to be mindful that sometimes how we hear things might just be based upon our experience, how we've always done things. but it's not necessarily what the other person meant. And that could go either way as the sender or the receiver of the communication. But what he said about active listening is key, because active listening is truly listening to relate and understand, not just hearing what was said. So let's take a look at some of the things here. This is what we call the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. So with this, so think about a house. How many of you own a home? How many of you would envision living in a dream home? If you're already not living in your dream home, okay? We all have that. Now, everybody, when they think about a house, they think about the exterior and the interior part of the house. They look at how it looks from the curb when you're outside, looking at the house from the front. They look at what they can envision what's going to go on in the house, how they're going to put their kitchen together, their bathrooms together, their living room, all of the above. Because they're going to live, they spend most of their lives in that house, and they want to enjoy that. But what are some of the things that most people, be honest, probably would never think about when it comes to that house? Foundation. What do we mean by foundation? What it's built on. Exactly. What if now you have this beautiful house? Because that's where you put all your emphasis into. You had these high expectations, and you kind of rushed through the part where they excavated to make sure everything was level. You rushed that part. You threw the slab in really quick. Didn't really take time, and now you've built the house right on top of it. But now the foundation has got cracks. It's got some holes. It got not just slight imperfections, but it's got maybe more imperfections than we should. What's going to happen to that beautiful dream home of yours? It's going to have problems. Now think about that as an analogy, and anything that you do, and we'll keep this not just in personal life, but in your work. If you don't have a strong foundation, do you think that all the things that you're working on, does it have the legs that you think to sustain and make it better? No. So what are we talking about with our foundation here? And there's a couple things here with this. This is at an individual, a team, and an organizational level. Let's start with the individual level. What would be that foundation? What was that? Well, morals. Okay, morals. Okay, that could be a part. Absolutely. What's another thing before I say it? Yes. Mental health. Okay, yeah. It's how we think. We got to be able to look at things differently than we have before. Just like how people look at the glass half empty, are we looking at it half full? We also have to be able to be a better listener, active listener. We have to. Who's the first person you have to be an active listener with? Yourself. Because if you're not listening to yourself, then you think you're going to communicate effectively to other people? No. I'll get into that a little shortly later. So that foundation at the individual level is you, how we think differently. We have to be able to think differently from a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset operates in the past and the future. Just like how I lived my life for the first 30 years of my life before I made this change. Reason why I constantly was anxious, had anxiety, why I was reactive, why I exploded with anger from my aggressive behavior, and why I was a passive communicator was because, again, that lack of validation, but it was, again, because my mind was constantly in the past and the future. I lived my life with high expectations of myself and other people. What happens with expectations? Just overall. You get disappointed. You get disappointed. It's true. You get disappointed because there are going to be things beyond your control. What is, again, if I were to, there's a lot of things beyond our control, but if I were to put them into 2 buckets, what are the 2 buckets that I'm looking for that are beyond your control? We kind of already touched on it a little bit. What can you not control at any given time? So how others respond. So in case, would that be safe? I can't control another person. Can't. Even if you're a mom or dad, you might be able to control your kids on some level. Of course, they're going to listen, but you can't control them like you think you can. Can't. And what else can you not control? What is that? Emotions, which would be people. But what other things we can't control? What if you got behind a school bus here coming to work today and you got in late? Can't control time. No, you can't control, but you can manage it more effectively when you value it better. Yes, but time itself you can't control. Can't stop it. You can't delay it, but you can value it to manage it better. Yeah. So there's some form. We can't control situations. Some certain parts of it we can. So if you know going to an area that there's a lot of toxicity, I could avoid it. I could not show up, and because I don't want to be put myself in. You could control that, but in itself, you can't control the entire situation. You never will control every aspect of a situation. Now, if you would have asked me that 26 plus years ago, I would have said you're nuts, because I can control everything. And that's why I was always angry. That's why I was always anxious. That's why I had, on average, 2 or 3 anxiety attacks every year, and one where it took me to the hospital because of the control that I couldn't control. You can't control other people in situations, period. You can only control yourself. So we're going to talk about that. So with that, we got to understand what the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence starts with: self-awareness. So we can control what you can control. You can't control other people. You can't control other situations. We talked about expectations. Love being in the past and future. Expectations are always tied to outcomes, to things that are beyond our control. If you put all your energy into an expectation attached to an outcome, are you going to experience it often through frustration, overwhelmness, stress, anxiety, anger, possibly? Yeah. Now, what if I were to think in the moment from a growth mindset, being present? Fear is reduced in the present moment. Cannot thrive in the present moment. It only thrives in the past and the future. Instead of operating from expectations, I'm going to operate from intentions. It's a big difference. See, I can control my intentions because they're coming from me. I can't control expectations because there are other people and situations. See how that's a difference in how we think. Now imagine you're doing that individually. Imagine now your team begins to pick up on that overall through your example and resourcefulness. And now let's say your organization starts to, now again, we're getting into a perfect world here. I mean, the likelihood of that happening on a mass scale is probably slim to none at this point, but it can be done. And I've seen some organizations that have done that. Who's from, especially the ladies will probably know this one. Who's familiar with the company Zappos? Online shoe retailer. You look at their value proposition, has nothing to do with shoes. It's all about helping people to have a great experience and be happy. You think that environment's toxic, and yet they pull it off and put the wool over people's head and still give awesome service and great valuable experience? No, they are a product. From their inception, when that company started, they started with these principles. They operate from intentions. They go through ongoing training and personal and professional development, not just once here and there, ongoing. It's ongoing. And it's like with anything. You build a strong foundation, that foundation will take care of you in your home. Your foundation up here will take care of you and hopefully the people around it that you can impact. You don't, you're going to get caught up in the control you can't control. Zappos is ranked in the top 5 for customer service year after year after year after year because of what they do internally, operating from what I'm already sharing with you and what I'm going to add some more things that you haven't heard yet. So we can control, it's our intentions by trusting the process. I can control what I can control, letting go of what I can't, and knowing my results will be a byproduct of my intentions. I still have to have faith that what I can't control will do its part to get the results. But if I attach myself to the control I can't control, I get lost in what I can, and more often I'm going to be frustrated every step of the way. That's going to build more conflict. What I just shared with you will help to reduce conflict to healthier levels, to see things for what it is, not what you think it should be. I'll say that again. To see things for what it is. You might still have your perception and biases and different look on things, but you're going to know that other people may not see it that way. The Gen Z might see it differently than the millennial. The millennial might see it different from the Gen X. but I'm gonna choose to see it for what it is, even though I have my own perception of it, but I'm gonna choose to see it for what it is so we can find out collectively what is best overall. That is a game changer. Yes. So with enabling, you are always, because you want things done right, you're going to just do it when somebody's not doing it. Instead of letting, again, giving that person a chance to learn from their mistake and to encourage them to come out of their comfort zone, that you're not going to judge them and think they're incompetent or stupid, but giving them that opportunity to do it. Now, if they continue to make the mistakes over and over and not doing what they're supposed to do, okay, that's a different story. And that over time might lead to them, not being a fit for the role, or maybe have to be let go. It's just part of life. That happens. I'm not saying you're going to stop that completely, but if you could reduce that, but it's going to eliminate people being dependent. Healthy workplace environments are based upon complementing one another. I'm not saying, hey, good morning, how you doing? That's not what I mean. Complementing is that you're being the example and the resource of everything we've talked about so far. And it's through the 5 things that you can control, which I'm going to share right now, that when people can do that for themselves, you're empowering them through empathy and kindness to do for themselves. You're encouraging them to step up out of their comfort zone to do it. So there are 5 things that we can control every day as human beings. Well, there's more than 5, but I'm looking for 5 here. What are things that you could control each and every day? I'm looking for 5 things. A lot of you have already said it already, but to dig down and think about it. So respond would be, in this case, emotions. I could either, if I'm angry right now. Normally, I would react from that. If I react from that anger, is that going to be a good thing? No. But if I'm angry, I can still respond. I may not be able to respond right then because I'm angry. So I might have to take a breath, compose myself, and then I can respond from a positive emotion while I deal with my anger later, or at that point going forward. Or maybe I have to go remove myself for 10 minutes. Maybe I have to go sleep on it before I send that email, before I respond. So emotions, we could control our emotions. That's one. How about something else? What else? We've already talked about some of the big areas already. Communicate. We could control our communication. It starts with you. You're either communicating from your inner critic or your inner champion. I wrote an international best-selling book in this area called Master Your Inner Critic, Resolve the Root Cause, Create Prosperity. And it's about overcoming your self-limiting beliefs and how to learn how to communicate from your inner champion rather than your inner critic. We have both of them. But be honest with yourself. What do you think you communicate mostly from to yourself each and every day? Your inner critic or inner champion? Mine was my inner critic for the first 31 years of my life. It was like 90-10, and I'm honest. Have I eliminated my inner critic? No. You never eliminate it completely, but I operate from my inner champion. But be honest with yourself. If it's your inner critic, it's okay. But just knowing that when you operate from your inner critic and knowing that's where you are, it's also impacting how you're communicating to other people. You don't even realize you're doing it. And I'm going to talk about how that's coming out shortly. We can control our communication to ourselves and others. We can learn to be more specific, clear, and concise with our communication rather than based on assumption and speculation that we talked about earlier. We can control that. Now, I'm going to get into communication here shortly on a separate slide. I'll go more into length on that. So we got communication and emotions. What else can you control? What was it again? Behavior. Control our behavior. Yes, we could control our behavior. So we got behavior, communication, emotions. 2 more. What is that? Perception. Yeah, perception could be emotions played into that with communication that would fall into that area. What do we another? Actions. Control our action. You're either focused on the priorities that matter or you're busy and not productive, which is just another form of procrastination. Most of the world is busy and not productive because they're caught up in the things that are really not important. Because it's easy to get caught up in the things that keep you safe rather than the things that are scary, but yet are going to allow you to grow. So actions. And then that last one is attitude. So let me go through all of them. Communication. You were either operating from your inner critic or your inner champion. And there are different styles of communication that you're operating from, which I'm going to talk about here shortly when I get to that slide. We can control that. And the thing about communication is effective communication. What do you think makes up effective communication? What am I doing right now? I'm speaking, but I have, what am I doing? Body language. 55% of effective communication is body language. 55%. What do you notice about my voice? Projecting, but what am I doing? This is the tone of my voice. Tone is 38% effective communication. Now, if I were in a room where maybe it was more laid back, maybe I was in maybe a rural area of the country where things are a little slower, I might be a little slower in the way I'm talking. I'm not conforming to be somebody different. I'm just throttling my tone back to adapt to the room. If I'm talking to a group of engineers, I know they're very factual based. If I start sharing things that are intangible or kind of what if, I've lost them. So I got to be able to connect with them on some hard facts. And I got to be a little bit more assertive with that. Not aggressive, because they don't like aggressive, but they like assertive. So I know how to adapt my communication to get them engaged, to be part of what I'm sharing, to have an experience. Big difference. So we got that. Now that makes up now 93% of effective communication. What's the balance of the 100%? Words, speaking. A lot of people would say speaking in the words are the most, would be the higher percentage, when really it's the less. You probably heard the adage, people won't always remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you helped them to make them feel. Body language. If I were up here doing this, and I was just sitting here in a corner and just, kind of looking at you from time to time, looking over here and talking with you, what message am I conveying to you? I'm just blocked off. Like I'm just, I'm not interested. Is that going to get you guys excited and engaged? No. But you see, like normally when I'm speaking, I know I'm on the stage because they are recording, but normally I would be down here and I would not get in your face, but I would engage you. I would welcome you, get you to feel comfortable, psychologically safe in this space, to take something that you can learn and apply. That's what, again, that's where effective communication is. But you have to know how to adapt that to different types of people. And you learn that, and then you just get better at it. We can control our behavior. Okay, and I'm going to get into the things about the different styles of behavior and communication. Is our behavior in alignment with our communication? How many of you have been around people where they say something and their behavior contradicts what they say? I grew up with that. That's where passive aggressive behavior and communication comes from. I learned it. Well, I learned. You know what I'm talking about. We're Gen X. We know this. We know this. And this is where, again, that we learn this type of stuff. So with that being said, and I'm going to get into the different styles where it'll make sense here shortly. Our attitude, it's happening for you, not to you. If it's happening for you, what does that mean? Let's say your team is going through a difficult challenge and it's frustrating right now. Normally you would react to it and slam the door. You go home and take it home with you. You're mad at some of your teammates. But if it's happening for you, if you adopt that type of attitude towards it, what does that now shift your way of thinking? There's a learning opportunity, because without the challenge, you can't turn it into an opportunity. And without the opportunity, you can't have results. It starts with the challenge. You see it happening for you. You embrace it, no matter how difficult it is. And you're all going to go through trials and tribulations, personally, professionally, as a team, as an organization, does not matter. All part of life. So we got that. Emotions, we talked about, it's, with emotions, I forgot to mention, when it's happening to you, attitude, that means you are deflecting, resisting what's happening. You're avoiding the challenges. You're deflecting onto other people that it's their fault. And how do you experience that? More anxiety, more stress, more frustration, more anger, more toxicity, more conflict. There you go. Now, emotions, you either are responding or reacting. We have to learn that negative emotions are a message that something is unresolved. We don't have to react from it. We can respond from a positive emotion. Whether if you take a pause, then respond, remove yourself for 10 minutes, come back next morning, and then respond. And then our actions. Most people are busy, but not productive. They're caught up on social media all day. They're chasing shiny objects. They're looking to do the easier tasks. No, saying in their head, see, I was busy. I couldn't get to this. It happens all the time. We're not prioritizing our schedules. We're not focusing on the priorities that matter. We don't plan accordingly. So actions play a big part. Now imagine you're doing that, your team's doing that, and your organization's doing that. What do you think the difference is now? You're going to turn those challenges into opportunities and results. A lot better. A lot better. They have to be aligned. And that's not always easy. So what I'm sharing is not, again, this is all a process. Nobody graduates from this. It's never going to be perfect. Sometimes this could take years. But I can tell you, it works when people are committed. I did this with a commercial construction company in Connecticut. And Zappos does this all the time. This is why they're a model for most companies. And unfortunately, most companies just don't do it. But I did this with a commercial construction company 2 years ago, and we did this from the top down, 600 people in the company. And they saw a dramatic shift in their KPIs. Their engagement increased, morale increased, retention went up, communication improved. They were winning more bids, even if they were slightly the higher bidder on commercial projects that they did. It works, but you got to have the buy-in from everybody. That's always the issue, because not everybody's bought it. And it doesn't mean everyone's, even this company I did, everybody was bought in. There was still probably going to be a handful of people that didn't do it, but a lot of them are not even there anymore. They're somewhere else. And that happens. You're never going to, I'm a baseball fan. Are you going to bat 1,000? No. But if I were batting 250 and now I got my average up to 350, it's a lot better than 250, right? So it's always about progress. So we gotta understand what we can control, and that is the 5 things: communication, behavior, attitude, emotions, action. Can I control those same 5 things in other people? No. So I got to learn to let go of that. Focus on your intentions rather than expectations. Focus on what you can control only. And when you can do that, you can regulate it better. You can learn how to operate from empathy. And empathy doesn't mean you're doing it for people or pleasing and enabling. You're being the example and a resource to do for themselves. Hey, you're having a rough time at home? Hey, you don't have to go into all the details. It's okay. I've been there. I had a tough time myself. I used the EAP. Have you ever used the EAP? No. Well, I don't trust that, because then HR is going to know that I was in there and think there's something wrong with me. They don't know. It's strictly confidential. I used it and it helped me out a lot. Maybe it will work for you. Try it. That's an example of being a resource. You're not a therapist. You're not a counselor. You're not there to solve their challenges. You're there to be the example and a resource to help them to do for themselves. That's where empathy comes in. And then you got to know how to communicate it properly. And motivation is simply being disciplined and consistent. See, motivation in itself is fleeting. Motivation is useless. It doesn't work. I only kept it there because that's part of the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. I interpret motivation as discipline. You do the things you know they're going to fill your cup, and you be consistent with it. Even when you don't feel like doing it, you do it anyway. Just like Nike says, just do it. So those are the 5 pillars. This is what builds our foundation, everybody. And when you can focus on what you can control, you commit to it. Just like, again, discipline. Discipline and consistent will be your commitment. And now you see challenges as opportunities to turn them into results, and confidence goes up. Confidence is just a byproduct of everything we talked about. And when your confidence goes up, imagine everybody else's confidence goes up. This is not about ego. Now it's a collective energy, a consciousness that brings people together. We can get more done and get through any challenge, more, even bigger ones than we've ever been through before, and turn it into better opportunities. Doesn't always mean it's ever going to be everything you ever dreamed of or always come out the way you want it, but somehow it does work out. But you don't get tied when something doesn't go right. You don't get tied to it. Now, what's easy to say and to do is another. But when things don't go my way, doesn't bother me like it did. you say that's because of old age now, and you get older, we get better at that. That's true, but I was doing this stuff about 15 years ago, and I would have never been able to do that 26 years ago because I was always attached to the outcome, always trying to control what I couldn't control. Now I know I've only got a little bit of time, so we're going to go through a lot of this. This is communication. If I'm operating from my inner critic, I'm either passive aggressive or passive aggressive. Passive communicators tend to be pleasers and enablers. Remember I told you I had a strong need for validation. I'm a recovering pleaser enabler. So I was a passive communicator. People that are aggressive tend to be perfectionists. They have a hard time delegating. And when they have to delegate, what do people do when they have a hard time delegating? What you probably work with, you could be working with people now, or you had in your prior jobs. What do they tend to do? It's a big term that a lot of people hate that word. Micromanage, right? They're always breathing down your back. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Because they don't trust. Not that they don't trust themselves either, because they want to control what they can't control. Imagine you're a combination of both. Oh my God. Whew. But see, I was a passive communicator, but an aggressive behaviorist. You want to make sure that your communication and your behavior are assertive. They're in alignment. Assertive means that you are specific, clear, and concise with yourself every morning. Every morning when I wake up, I look in the mirror and I say, what can I control? What can I not control? I always remind myself, Chris, this is what you're good at. This is what you're not good at. And when I communicate to other people, I do my best to be specific, clear, and concise. No matter if I'm the sender or the receiver, I'm going to make sure that I'm specific, clear, and concise. So who's responsible for effective communication? The sender or receiver? Trick question. Both would be in a perfect world. What can we not control? Other people. So how can it be the sender and receiver? Both. Who's responsible for effective communication? Well, what if you're the receiver? Yourself. Doesn't matter if you're the sender receiver. You are responsible. Let's say she asks me a question. Let's say she goes, Chris, I need to get this project done right away. Now, the old Chris would have said, okay. I would have walked and dropped everything else I was doing, got it done. Now, I would have been in the final hour trying to get the other things done. Frustrated, stressed, anger at her because she put this on me, but I didn't let her know because I wanted to please her. Is that helping anything? No. But what could I have done differently? She said, I need this project done right away, and she walked away. I could say, wait a minute. I just need to ask a few questions. You said you required this right away. I'd like to help, but I got 2 other projects right now that are due today. If this has got to be done right away, I'll have to say no. But if there is room for this to be done over the next couple of days, can you give me some more information on that and more clarity of what has to get done? See, that took an extra 15, 20 seconds to be specific. Do you think now I've offset that assumption and speculation? Yeah. And now I've reduced that expectation between both of us and other people that are impacted by it? Yes. That's an example. Most people don't do that. Matter of fact, 98% of people don't do that. This is why this could be a game changer when you can do this. You got to be conscious of it. Self-awareness, your foundation. You got to discipline. You got to do it every day if it's going to stick. I know it's easy in concept. To do it is always the challenging part. That's just like if you go to the gym every day and you've been doing it for years, you'll get better at it. It's like anything, you're going to get better, but you got to keep doing it. So how it's going to work. So assertiveness is a interdependent trait versus these are codependent. This is what creates an interdependent, psychologically safe workplace where conflict now at a moderate level can serve us. And this is what keeps us stuck, dependent on each other, and raising conflict and leading to more lower job retention, lower morale, everything above. That doesn't work your way. So here's the tools for conflict resolution. Gentlemen, your name was? Yeah. Oscar. Oscar came up with active listening. There is no better way. Active listening is the most important. That's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. The more that we can listen and ask questions puts us more in control of letting expectations not fall through the cracks. because you can't control what somebody else is going to do or say, or if they're just going to nod their head and you think they understand when they don't. Especially the younger generation. A lot of them they'll do that. Doesn't mean they understand. So we got to be able to request clarification, be attentive, summarize, paraphrase. We live in a world now with AI. God, you could, if especially you're on Zoom or Teams, you could have AI record that, right? But we still got to make sure we're all on the same page. So there's no room for assumption and speculation. But these are the things that when we can learn now to set the stage by being, again, self-awareness, self-regulation, leading by example and resourcefulness through empathy, the 5 pillars we talked about, we can now be in a better position to ensure mutual understanding. We can understand people's body language. When somebody's doing this, that means they might be resistant to what I'm sharing. So maybe what can I do to help unravel those arms? Get them to lean in, and now they're engaged. Now, I still can't control that, but I can do my best to be more assertive in helping to do that, more understanding and relating to where they are. And no matter what my biases are, I got to suspend that judgment. We all have biases, but it's knowing not to let those biases intervene in our day-to-day. We are all a team, regardless of if we respect each other. What we do in our private lives does not matter. That's what the whole thing about diversity, right? We have to respect each other's role and duties. We're not here because you might disagree with somebody's religion, what area they favor in politics. That has no place in the workplace. This is about what are we doing together to accomplish something. That's where we got to put those natural biases to the side. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And we have to use I statements. Why do we have to use I statements? If I said you, if I said something and I started communicating and I said you, what is the immediate thing that when you hear that word you, what are you going to do? Defensive. I am dealing with a difficult situation right now that demands some attention. I've looked at some of the things that you and I have been doing over the last year, which worked well in these areas, but it's these areas that have now come to light that are now having a negative impact in these areas. What can you and I do together to make this better? See, that's more likely to put somebody on the offense. The I takes away that defensiveness off of you because I'm stating something that's impacting me, but not that I'm saying, hey, you're the cause of my frustration. That's going to put you on the... So I statements are more likely to put people on the offense, not the defense. That's another area to help reduce conflict and so on. Role and duties. Why are these important? So if we have roles and duties and we understand what our role and duties are, do you think that's going to also play a part in helping to reduce that assumption and speculation that can lead to conflict? Oh, yeah. You realize that I've done this in certain smaller companies where sometimes the role and duties will have them, like on little, like things like where they're laminated and people can see it. So they just don't assume. But if we have a better understanding of our role and duties and we can communicate that, and we could create team agreements, which I'm going to show with you. Do you think that now when we're in alignment with our role and duties and have a team agreement, we're more likely to be, to navigate those difficult, challenging situations that we're going through as a team? Yeah. And with that being said, we can communicate this not one time, because usually your role and duties are communicated usually one time when you get onboarded to work someplace. Here, you got hired, these are your role and duties. They're in your employee when you got onboarded. And what do most people do? They just glance through it real quick, throw it in the desk drawer somewhere, and they never look at it again. And you just assume that what you're doing is what you're supposed to do, and everyone else thinks it's something else. This has got to be communicated on a regular basis. Doesn't mean every day, but communicated. How many of you have team huddles? Got a few here? Huddles are great. They don't have to be. They're not like meetings where you have to have a half an hour meeting, an hour meeting. A huddle could be like 10 minutes. You get together and you lets everybody know what they're going to be working on today. What's in my control, what isn't. What are my objectives and how it's going to impact each and every one of us? And we communicate that. And we align that with our role and duties. And then at the end of the day, we come back together and debrief, see what worked, what didn't, and what progress are we making. Do you think by doing that, I'm not saying you have to do that every day, but you think by doing that, that's going to also keep us on track to navigate those challenges and turn them into opportunities and reduce operating from expectations? Oh, yeah. The organizations, think about the teams that win Super Bowls. I'm a big sports fan. They're the teams that they don't win by talent. Talent will only get you so far. Skill will only get you so far. It's the teams that communicate at the highest level. Some of the teams that end up winning the big games are not the players that are most talented. They're the players, sometimes they weren't even drafted. They have good coaching. They've created a culture where people are related to and understood. That's what builds a winning team environment. This is where we can look at now conflict in a healthy way, a proactive way, not a negative way. So here's an example of some team agreements. And I'll make sure that each of you get a copy of this. This is just an example. You could customize this to any way you want. But basically what a team agreement is you're agreeing to what you're going to agree to do in your role and duties, not just in your role and duties, but what you're going to do as a team. So let's just say like we're in a break room and the service that comes in to clean up the garbage was off that day. They didn't come in, the garbage is overflowing. What do most people do? They probably walk by and go, that's disgusting. And they just walk away. They just assume somebody else is going to pick it up. But what a team will do is they'll say that, well, okay, if that happens, then John that day, if it's Mondays, John's responsible for taking it out. Tuesdays, it's Sarah. Wednesdays, it's Karen. Thursdays, it's Tom. So everybody's doing something outside of their role and duties to do what's best for the team. That's what a team agreement is. And you're committing to that to you, to your team members, to your workplace, and even your clients, and signing it and dating it. That's what creates a better environment. So huddles, team agreements, roles and duties, and not just doing it once, but dripping it over time is what is going to get people more engaged, build more morale, improve communication, and then see conflict as an opportunity. So now we're going to look at some tips for preventing workplace, and we're going to get into the role of leader. And I only got about 5 minutes. We'll get through it. But we got to set clear intentions and boundaries, not expectations, because you start saying expectation, you're putting people into the control they can't control. Focus on what they can control. What intentions, what are the things that you can control? And knowing when to set boundaries. Have an open communication. Don't make yourself available. Don't let people can walk into your office at any given moment. Set certain times when people can come in. Use more resources to help people help themselves, instead of them being dependent on you and always calling you, texting you, and popping in your office every 5 minutes. These are the things that are going to help create more autonomy, more growth, and more engagement. And by doing that, you're going to foster a culture of collaboration and inclusion. So what's the role of what is the workplace mediation? Anybody want to say what mediation means to you? We're going to flip to this pretty quick because I only have about 4 minutes. What's mediation mean to you? What was that? Yeah, so in this case, again, that somebody that's going to come in, that's going to be sometimes third party, neutral, not biased to one area or the other, and kind of hearing what's happening, why there's a divide, a conflict, and find some resolution. But remember, we said we don't want to be that organization now that's doing that from a reactive standpoint. We want to be able to do this from a place of being proactive. So even if you're not a mediator by trade, that's not your title, you could still be a mediator. And by being a mediator, you could be that through your example, your resourcefulness, how you communicate to yourself and other people, through your behavior, that it's in alignment with your communication in an assertive way, through your attitude, it's happening for you, not to you, through your emotions and how you respond versus react to others in situations, and your action. If you're an example of those 5 things every day, you're going to have an impact on other people, most likely in a positive way. Doesn't mean everyone's going to get it, but more people will be intrigued by that. What is he or she doing? Maybe I could do that. So with that being said, this is the definition of workplace mediation. This is more of a formal definition of what it is. And you can see, again, it's about relationships, communication, and getting engagement. And it's voluntary, meaning that you do it regardless. So and every good trusted advisor or leader is someone who is consistent in his or her example and resourcefulness daily doing this. So here's the role of the mediator. So again, you don't have to prepare for a mediation in itself. That would be if there's a major problem. But by preparing for mediation, that could be simply doing a huddle every day, or every other day, or maybe a couple times a week. That could be a form of mediation, because now you're communicating more at a higher level. You're discussing your role and duties in any given situation you're working on with the challenge. You're debriefing later on. That's a way to be proactive to offset conflict. That's a form of mediation. What doesn't mean that you have to actually be at that point where things are getting so out of hand that now you're brought in. You're doing this from the inception. And you're constantly not just rehashing the issues, you're just looking at the issues that have not been solved yet. What can we be doing differently? Taking the lead on that. We're not here to rehash, point the fingers, why somebody dropped the ball. What can we do better? What's working, what's not, and what can we adapt to change? And don't expect that somebody's going to open up the dialogue or be open and forthright. We got to ask questions. Because if somebody doesn't be proactive to ask the questions, no one's going to eventually say anything or answer it. It's like with anything. Like if I get one person here just to start talking, you notice that other people start talking. There have been some places sometimes where nobody says anything because nobody wants to, like, oh my God, if I say that, if I'm wrong, they're going to think I'm stupid. And nobody learns that way. That's why a room like this is psychological. We can learn from each other. There's no right or wrong answers. And there never will be. It's just all about learning. And then how can we find an amicable agreement? Doesn't mean we're going to agree on every point, but finding what's best for what is. Remember I said, looking at things for what it is, not what we think it should be. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a real world where not everything's going to be perfect. Everything's not going to go your way, but we have to adapt to what is, doing what's best for the situation and the people impacted by it. And then following up on what's working to make it better, and constantly going back and finding different ways if things aren't working. So look at the mediation process is ongoing. It's a daily thing, not something that you gotta become the top priority every day, but just having it become part of your role and duties each day, regardless of your title. You don't have to be a leader to be doing this. You could take the lead just of where you're at, whatever that may be. So here's some essential skills in mediation. Some of the key skills. We talked about empathy, questioning, reframing techniques. So empathy, again, is people who lead by example, lead by being resourceful, not by telling people what to do, doing it for them, sharing, suggesting, empowering people to draw the conclusion for themselves, what they can do better to step up. That's what encourages growth. That's what helps to take conflict and neutralize. Just even one thing that you can do that you're not doing, or you could do it better or more often, that could start now to take conflict, reduce it to a healthier level within your control, and to make improvements for yourself and then hopefully for your people that you work with indirectly, and for the community that you impact. What's one thing I'd like to hear from a few of you? Yes.
Clear expectation.
So in this case, about intentions. You can still use expectations because that's a term we've all learned how to use. But remember, expectations I shared today puts us more into the control we can't control, versus intentions you can. Those 5 things that we can control. Excellent.
Put biases aside.
Put biases aside. Absolutely. Just that comes to the self-awareness and self-regulation part of the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. Knowing that I can't put biases, because that is, say to yourself, by doing that, that's always going to work against me and what our team is doing overall. And it always does. Yes. Team agreement. I'll make sure that James and everybody, I'll send you don't just have to take the slide version. I'll send everybody a full blown, so you have that. Great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Because I think it's important, it sends a clear message that you care about the outcome, and if there's anything else that fell through the cracks, you
Yep.
get that same, mediation and helping resolve.
Great. Well, everybody, I know it's that time, and I want to thank for all of you for participating, being part of this experience. It is a pleasure to be serving your organization here today, and thank you for being part of this, because we all learn from each other. I'm just up here facilitating, just being a role model to all, come together and learn together to see conflict in a proactive, healthier way, that we could do more in our workplaces and our communities. Thank you for the opportunity to serve.